She didn't flinch when they called her the N-word, didn't blink when they called her slave, loud enough for the entire fight pit to hear. Right before the crowd started laughing and the betting odds turned against her. Because when Petty Officer Jalen Ariza stepped into that illegal warehouse, she wasn't there to argue, she was there to listen, to absorb every slur, to take every elbow, to give them space to show exactly who they were without realizing who she was. And when they forced her to fight, when they broke the rules and stacked the deck, she showed them something their uniforms had forgotten, what Navy SEAL combat actually looks like when it stops pretending. But before we show you the moment she snapped their knees like tree branches, and the second they realized who she really was, drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Then smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on the bell icon. Because today's story isn't about words. It's about what happens after the last slur is spoken, and someone like her stops holding back. She heard the door lock behind her. Not a soft latch, but a deep metallic clunk that echoed across the concrete walls of what used to be a shipping depot, and now passed for something far darker. No signage, no fire exit maps, no uniforms, just folding chairs, rusted floodlights, and the thick scent of old metal, sweat, and power. This was where you came to see rules get broken, for cash. The fight pit wasn't a circle. It was a square of matted rubber, laid uneven over sunken concrete. No ropes, no cages, just bloodstains you weren't supposed to notice, and betting lines you weren't supposed to ask about. There were no tickets, no spectators. Everyone here had either fought, bet, or bled on these mats before. The woman walked in wearing boots and a zippered hoodie. Hood down, no logos, eyes half-lidded, like someone already used to being overlooked. She didn't flinch when two guards with buzz cuts and visible tattoos gave her a once-over, didn't ask what they were scanning for. The taller one, white, mid-30s, arms like tree trunks, snorted. New blood? The other shrugged. If she lasts around, I'll be surprised. She said nothing, didn't correct him, didn't offer a name, just kept walking toward the folding table where a woman with a tablet and a cash box sat, taking names and entry fees. Alias? The woman asked. The fighter paused. Nix. No last name, no ID offered. The woman typed it in without blinking. Late ad. You're up in 15. The hooded figure nodded once, then stepped into the outer ring where the fighters waited. The room was full of military ghosts, men with Navy anchor tattoos on their necks, old army rucks converted to gym bags, USMC patches blacked out with permanent marker. Some of them had been kicked out, others had left before the institution could. A few were still in, moonlighting between deployments, trading in secrets for dollars, loyalty for sport. They didn't look like amateurs, but they didn't look clean either. And every one of them clocked her as she passed, half out of curiosity, half out of something darker. She was the only woman, the only black fighter, and the only one who didn't make eye contact. Someone muttered something about imports. Someone else whispered, "She even weigh enough to bleed?" She ignored them. No flinch, no roll of the shoulders, no twitch of the mouth, but she heard every word. That was the rule here. Fighters didn't talk back, not if they wanted to stay off the radar, because in this place, there were no referees, no medical team, unless someone paid out of pocket, no phones, no footage, no appeals, just fists, blood, and enough cash to keep the wrong people quiet. She didn't come to impress them, didn't come to argue. She came to let them show their worst. So when she finally struck back, there'd be no room left for excuses. She wasn't in it for the money. The woman they called Nix hadn't even asked about the prize pool. She'd handed over the registration fee in cash, clean bills, no questions, and walked off before the organizer finished logging her entry. Nobody noticed. And that was the point. She didn't need them to notice her yet. Somewhere outside the warehouse's back perimeter, a van sat silent, with its lights off, parked at an angle that couldn't be seen from the lot. Inside it, an encrypted recorder ticked quietly, looping off-site to a secure internal server tagged for NCIS monitoring. But she didn't need the van. She wasn't wired, wasn't tracked, no earbud, no camera, no comms. That was by design, because this op wasn't sanctioned, not fully, not the way it would look on paper. The official story, if anyone ever asked, was that Petty Officer Jalen Ariza had been granted an extended R&R leave after finishing her last rotation with a forward expeditionary medical team in Djibouti. The internal log noted light duty. The email string cited emotional decompression. But that's not what her commanding officer had whispered to her the night before she left. You don't escalate, he'd said. You don't act unless you're forced. But if you find what we think is there, let it unfold. We'll be watching. The tip had come through a third-party informant, a dead operator, technically suicide, but his body had bruises the autopsy didn't explain, a fight not listed on the deployment logs. 2 witnesses vanished after questioning, then the account withdrawals started. Unusual betting activity, all cash, tied to usernames that, when backtraced, didn't just lead to civilians or ex-contractors, they led to active duty men, some from Ariza's own branch, one with SEAL tabs on his record. This wasn't just illegal, it was betrayal in uniform. And she'd seen that kind of betrayal before. That's why they'd chosen her, because Jalen didn't carry herself like a SEAL, didn't wear the muscle, didn't posture, didn't talk about her pipeline. But she'd been downrange more times than most of the men running these fights. She'd been a breacher before she was a medic, cleared kill houses with live rounds before she learned to stitch. She'd seen good men die quiet deaths while cowards clapped from behind blast walls. And she'd made a promise. Never to the Navy, but to herself. If the uniform ever became the shield that protected predators, she'd step out of it and end it from the inside. This wasn't ego, it was cleanup. And the only reason she was still standing silent near the outer ring was because no one had given her a reason to break cover yet. The announcer didn't have a mic. He didn't need one. His voice was the kind that cut through noise without effort, deep, southern, amused. Next fight, he said, grinning wide enough to show his gold molar. We got Diesel, 2-time champ, no losses, against... He glanced down at a paper. Nix, just Nix. That got a few chuckles from the crowd. Jalen stood motionless near the edge of the mat, still hooded, still quiet. Her gloves were taped, fingers exposed, knuckles flattened with gauze so thin it was practically ceremonial. Diesel, on the other hand, wore a pair of custom-wrapped gloves so stiff they looked like they could dent concrete. No one said anything. No one enforced anything. The rules here were flexible, if you looked the part. He did. She didn't. Look at her arms, man. Someone laughed behind the betting table. She ain't got a single vein poppin'. Diesel's gonna fold her in half. Another voice added louder. She even cleared the weight check. Looks like she snuck in through the kitchen. Someone closer said it quieter, not as a joke, just casually, like breathing. Damn shame we still letting slaves fight back. No one reacted. No one even flinched. The man next to him smirked, like it wasn't the first time he'd said it. Jalen heard it. She didn't blink, didn't look toward the voice, didn't flex her jaw or shift her shoulders. Instead, she stepped into the ring when called and stood across from Diesel. 6'2", 220 pounds, tatted across the collarbone, grinned like a shark who's been waiting for permission to eat. He sized her up like she was a practice bag. Tell you what, he said, circling. I won't hit the face. Gotta keep the girls pretty, right? Jalen said nothing. When the signal dropped, she didn't lunge. She let him come. The crowd wanted carnage, but they didn't get it. Diesel charged hard, swung faster, and missed just barely. She turned her hip, let it graze air, then shifted, ducked, let him overextend. She gave them what they wanted, not victory, struggle. For 1 full minute, she let him slam her into the mat, then roll free. Let him press against her guard, then slip under the arm. She even let him land 1 shot to the ribs, just hard enough to look real. And when she finally took the win, it was by role reversal. Quick, clean, technical, no knockout, just an armbar that didn't bend far enough to snap, but far enough to win. The crowd booed, called it boring. She stood slowly, brushing grit from her elbow, eyes still blank. Someone near the back shouted, "They should have just let her sing. Ain't nobody want to see a house girl grapple." Laughter followed, real laughter, ugly, full-bodied, the kind that turns bile in your throat. Jalen turned her back to it all and walked off the mat, still not reacting. Because in rooms like this, racism wasn't shouted, it was performed, and her silence was part of the act, until it wasn't. They started calling her charcoal. It showed up first on the side bets board, scrawled in red marker next to the odds column. Charcoal. plus 275 not nicks, not the girl, just a slur with enough plausible deniability to pretend it wasn't one. No one corrected it. If anything, it caught on. A promoter leaned in during her next prep and said it under his breath like it was endearing. "Let's go, Charcoal. Make it look good this time, all right?" She nodded once, didn't even blink, because by now the trap had started to close. After 2 wins, both slow, both awkward by design, the cash flow spiked, not just in side bets, but off-record wagers. A man in a gray hoodie had walked in carrying a roll of bills thick enough to make the handler nervous. He put it all on her to lose, and the odds shifted again. Charcoal, plus 380. One of the regulars asked the bookie why the line wasn't dropping. She was winning, wasn't she? The answer was a smirk. Because the only reason she's winning is no one's trying yet. That was the narrative now. She was a fluke with the wrong skin, the wrong gender, and most importantly, the wrong attitude, because she still wasn't reacting. And nothing angers a man faster than a target who refuses to flinch. After her 3rd fight, another deliberate stall followed by a controlled submission, one of the organizers stepped in directly. He wasn't loud, wasn't dressed like security, no badge, but the way people cleared the path for him said enough. Commander-style presence, late 40s, white hair buzzed tight, tall, lean, still carried himself like a team leader on leave. The way his boots sat flat, the way his eyes scanned without moving his head. She knew the look. He didn't give his name, just stood at the locker door while she toweled off and said, "We don't usually get consistency from your kind." She paused. "Fighters? Pretty liars," like he said. "Ones who move too clean and speak too little." She said nothing. He let the silence stretch, then smiled thin. "You here for money or something else?" She dried her wrists slowly. "Money's fine." He nodded once, pretending to buy it, then took a step closer. "You've got one more tonight. Make it your last, win or lose." She stared at the wall behind him, not in fear, in calculation. He was military, still active, she'd bet on it, maybe JSOC connected, definitely SEAL adjacent. And somewhere inside that glint behind his eyes, he didn't think she belonged in the same world. "You understand me?" he asked. Her answer was quiet. Clear as day. He walked off. Later, when the board updated again, the new listing didn't even pretend anymore. Final fight. Charcoal versus Razor. There was no point pretending it was sport. This wasn't about fists anymore. It was about putting her in her place. And they thought they'd finally built the kind of fight she couldn't walk away from. They introduced him like a showpiece. 5-time finisher, never dropped, never tapped, the announcer shouted. "The one, the only Razor!" The crowd surged forward, not because they loved him, but because they knew what he was about to do. Razor wasn't a fighter, he was a butcher, a silent one, the kind who didn't talk, didn't gloat, and didn't pull punches. And tonight the crowd didn't want a fight, they wanted a message. Razor walked in from the side gate, wearing a sleeveless black hoodie, taped wrists, and brass knuckles laced under his gloves. Illegal in every sense. No one cared. A man beside the betting station laughed and shouted, "Time to trim the fat!" They meant her. The board flashed again. Charcoal, plus 650 Razor, win by KO. 1,100. Jalen stepped forward in silence. No music, no announcement, no intro, just her boots hitting the mat and the low hum of 100 men waiting for something ugly. The match was supposed to be a single round. 3 minutes. No breaks, no resets. But before the signal dropped, the announcer called an amendment. "Per house discretion," he said. "This bout will now be open format, continuous engagement, until one fighter can't continue." A few voices rose in confusion. Someone shouted, "Since when?" Another answered, "Since money talked." And just like that, the gloves came off, figuratively and literally. Razor stripped his hoodie. Underneath, full torso tattoos. Not tribal, not prison, military, a trident. She clocked it instantly. Right clavicle, faded but intact. He was a SEAL, or had been, and the way he looked at her, expressionless, eyes hollow. It wasn't a challenge, it was a sentence. The kind of stare given to targets, not opponents. Behind her, The betting pit grew louder. The slurs weren't whispered anymore. Put the mutt down! She's not gonna learn unless someone teaches her. A new chant started, low at first, then building. Break the bitch. Break the bitch. Jalen exhaled once through her nose. She hadn't moved, hadn't blinked, but something inside her shifted, because she could feel it now, what this place really was. Not an underground fight, a ritual, one designed to punish anything that didn't fit the mold, one built by men who'd once worn the uniform, but abandoned its honor the moment it stopped serving their ego, and they thought tonight would be the exorcism of her, of everything she represented. The bell rang. Razor didn't hesitate. He charged, full speed, no feint, no testing, leading elbow-high, brass-knuckled fist cocked low for a rib shot that could fold a full-grown man in two. He struck. The crowd surged forward, and in that moment, when impact cracked against skin and the blood rose sharp from somewhere under her cheekbone, Jalen Ariza finally stopped acting. The blow landed high just beneath her right cheekbone, glancing but heavy. It didn't knock her down, but it jarred her vision, sent a ripple through the back of her skull, and split the corner of her lip. A flash of copper hit her tongue, and for a moment, everything slowed. The crowd blurred. The chants folded into a wall of sound behind glass. Jalen didn't stagger, didn't raise her gloves, didn't react the way they expected. She just stood there, blood blooming at the edge of her mouth, head tilted slightly, like she was recalibrating, because she was. Her breath came in through the nose, slow and deep, once. Then she turned her head, fully this time, and looked straight into Razor's face. There was no fear there, no heat, no hate, just stillness. Controlled, level stillness. He flinched, barely, a twitch at the jaw, and then she spoke. One line, just loud enough for only him, and maybe the first row to hear. You made this live. That was it. She didn't posture, didn't shift her weight, didn't lower into a fighter's stance. She just said the words like she was marking a time of death. Razor's eyes narrowed, but something in his body hesitated because he'd seen that look before, somewhere, on someone who wasn't supposed to survive a room and walked out the only one breathing. The crowd didn't understand the shift yet. They were still laughing, still chanting, still pointing, but a few, just a few, fell quiet because instinct is louder than noise. And somewhere deep in the pit of the room, where the men who'd truly seen combat stood watching from the shadows, someone muttered, uh-oh. Razor moved again, fast, brutal, predictable. A low left feint followed by a right knee meant to slam her hip off balance. It didn't land, because Jalen wasn't there anymore. And in that moment, when her shadow twisted out of his arc, when her foot planted firm on the mat, when her torso coiled like a spring held too long, there was no more role play, no more restraint, no more pretending she was one of the lost. Jalen Ariza was no longer here to observe. She was here to end it. She didn't start with a punch. She started with his balance. Razor's right foot was planted forward, weight cocked on his lead leg after the failed knee strike. Jalen pivoted off her rear heel, slipped under his extended arm, and drove the blade of her hand just behind his collarbone. Not to hurt, but to rotate. His center of gravity buckled. She dropped her weight, ducked under the counterblow, and swept his back foot from inside his stance. Quick, quiet, brutal. He hit the mat before he realized he was falling, but she didn't follow him. She let him scramble up. Let him come again. Let him give her the second excuse. He roared this time, loud, embarrassed, swinging wild. Her left hand redirected the first strike off axis. Her right arm slipped inside his elbow and snapped upward, crushing his strike radius before it even finished the arc. Then came the first break. Her elbow twisted across his forearm. There was a crunch, not a clean snap, more like a tearing sound, like cartilage giving way under pressure. He howled, staggered, reached for her throat with his other hand. She caught the wrist, spun, dropped low into a pivoting squat, and slammed his own elbow into the point of her shoulder. Crack! This time it was clean. The scream that followed wasn't. It sounded wrong. Animal, not rage, panic. He stumbled backward, cradling both arms, neither working now. The crowd froze. Someone dropped their beer. Jalen stood still. No expression, no threat display, no tension. She waited. And Razor made his final mistake. He lunged, not with fists. He had none left. He threw his weight forward like a bear charging downhill, trying to tackle with pure mass, teeth bared, desperation flooding every muscle. She turned her body just enough to guide his shoulder past her hip, then lifted and brought the heel of her boot down, hard, onto the back of his knee as he overcommitted. His leg folded. Not bent, folded. The pop that followed sounded like a rifle crack. Razor hit the mat and didn't rise, didn't scream, didn't breathe for several seconds. And still, Jalen Ariza didn't move. She stood over him, motionless, as 3 seconds passed. Then 4. Then 5. No cheers, no whistles, just the stunned silence of men who'd just witnessed something their bodies recognized, even if their brains couldn't articulate it. This wasn't martial arts. It wasn't a lucky shot. It was close quarters neutralization. Tier 1, SEAL certified. And every man who'd ever trained for real-world engagement just realized she hadn't come to win. She came to end the problem. No one moved at first. Razor was still on the mat, arms useless, leg twisted, mouth open in a silent howl. Blood darkened the side of his jaw where he'd hit the mat wrong. A man nearby dropped his phone trying to record. It clattered against the concrete and went ignored. Then someone whispered it, low, shaky. "Wait a second, I've seen that takedown before." One of the older men near the back stepped forward slowly. Not a fighter, observer, late 50s, retired maybe. But the way his eyes narrowed like they were scanning a classified dossier, he wasn't new to this world. His voice cut through the stillness. "That's SEAL hand-to-hand, CQB variant, Tier 1. Someone laughed nervously. "What? She's a medic." "No," the man muttered. "She's not." The silence fractured. People began pulling back from the pit, glancing at each other. What the hell is going on? "She's not on the rolls. She moved like she's seen blood before." That's when the organizer from earlier, the white-haired SEAL adjacent one, stepped toward the ring. Not running, not furious, just recalibrating. He stared at her. She stared right back, and then he said it. "Oriza." Just one name, a quiet accusation. The reaction was instant. Someone in the crowd gasped. Another dropped a betting slip and said, "No, no way that's her. I thought she was classified. Black Ops rotation only. She's not supposed to exist outside Joint Command." But they knew now, even if they didn't know the full file, even if they'd never seen her face, they recognized the name. She didn't confirm it, didn't deny it, didn't move, just stood over Razor's broken frame like a shadow they hadn't seen coming because they hadn't been trained to recognize what real danger looked like when it didn't raise its voice. The white-haired man took a breath. "Pull the tapes," he barked to someone behind him. "Shut the doors. Nobody in or out." It was too late, because that van 2 blocks out had already marked the timestamp, already pinged the system, already forwarded the footage to the encrypted chain that didn't care about venue hierarchy or former rank. Inside the ring, Jalen Ariza still hadn't moved. She didn't have to. She'd already done what she came to do. Let them show themselves. Let them prove who they were. And now, they were the ones being watched. It began with a flicker in the hallway, a stutter in the lights, just once, like someone flipped a breaker out of sequence. Then came the static. Not from the speakers, there were none, but from the earpieces of 3 men near the side wall, men who'd been too quiet the whole night, who never placed bets, never joked, never stepped too close. They moved at the same time. Not rushed, not sloppy, trained. One walked calmly to the back exit and stood with his hands folded behind him. Another secured the betting table, pulling a small badge from under his jacket that no one recognized, but everyone understood. The third raised a shortwave radio and muttered 2 clipped words. "Confirm redline." A metal-on-metal clunk echoed from every door as they locked. Deadbolts engaged by hand from the outside. Someone tried the front latch and found it sealed. Panic rippled too late. Then the van rolled in, unmarked, blacked-out windows, low-profile tread that didn't screech on the concrete. A side panel opened before it even came to a full stop. Out stepped 4 operators. Not police, not local SWAT. Internal. You don't see men like this unless you've already lost the argument. They moved through the crowd without drawing weapons. They didn't need to. Their presence was enough. A man with a trimmed beard and a chest rig full of ID pouches stepped to the white-haired SEAL and spoke 3 words. "You're done here." The organizer didn't argue. He didn't even ask what unit they were from, because he already knew. Behind him, the pit fell silent. The cameras, hidden in the ceiling, powered on for the first time all night. Every angle, every bet, every blow. Documented. 2 of the men approached Razor, who was still crumpled on the mat, breathing shallow through clenched teeth. They knelt beside him, not to help, but to confirm. One nodded. "Injuries match breach protocol." "Confirmed intent to maim." Confirmed sanctioned brutality. Across the room, one of the embedded officers began collecting cash, not seizing, cataloging, everything bagged, labeled. This wasn't a raid, it was an extraction. Of names, of evidence, of rot. Jalen Ariza stood off to the side now, arms crossed, back resting lightly against a support column. She didn't speak, didn't nod, just watched as the system moved in like a scalpel. Not loud, not messy, but lethal. One man, panicked, tried to run. He got 3 steps before being pinned against the wall by a man who moved like he'd done it before. In sand, in mud, in places where escape wasn't an option. No Miranda rights were read, no press was notified, no cell phones were returned. What happened inside that warehouse would never make a headline. But careers ended that night, quietly, efficiently, exactly the way betrayal deserved to. By morning, the warehouse was empty. No yellow tape, no media vans, no forensic teams and booties combing the scene. Just an open space where the mat had been stripped, the folding chairs stacked, and the walls left bare, like it had never happened. But it had, and the men involved knew it. The organizer? Gone. Last known orders revoked. Security clearances flagged. Internal review pending. No official discharge yet, but no one expected him to wear a uniform again. Razor, hospitalized under private security. Dual arm fractures, knee reconstruction pending. Status medically inoperable for the foreseeable future. His name wouldn't appear in the debriefs. But the photos, those would live in sealed internal files for years. Several spectators, active duty, reserve, and retired, were placed under quiet investigation. Some would lose their clearances. Others would simply disappear from rotation. The ones with records clean enough to keep their pensions, they'd be watched. Not punished, just marked. Because in the military, the most powerful consequence isn't trial. It's quiet removal. And Jalen Ariza, she didn't get a medal. Didn't get thanked. Didn't get paraded through any corridor or handed a coin in secret. She walked out the back of the compound at 03:47 hours with a duffel bag slung over one shoulder and a healing bruise under her eye. The only thing waiting for her was a manila envelope. Inside, a reassignment order, temporary transfer, black slot, no unit listed, no return date. She folded it, tucked it in her bag, and kept walking. Halfway to the perimeter, she passed one of the operators who'd helped shut it down. He didn't salute, didn't speak, just nodded. Respect that didn't need words. She nodded back. That was all. Because in places like this, where rot runs deep and justice moves quiet, the only real victories aren't spoken. They're enforced. And every man who saw her that night, every man who laughed, who bet, who stayed silent, would carry that lesson into every room they entered from now on. You never know who's watching, and you never, ever know who's waiting to stop pretending. Would you have kept your cover as long as she did? Where do you draw the line between restraint and response? Did they force the outcome or choose it? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Then tap like, hit subscribe, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss one of these stories. Share this video with someone who still thinks strength comes with a uniform. And when you're done, check out the other stories on your screen now. We'll see you tomorrow, same time, with a brand new video.